What's up, everybody? How y'all doing tonight? Everybody doing good? Glad y'all joining. All right. Not streaming to politics, trying something else out to say that I am actually a podcast, because that's what we are. But we'll see how people filter in with it. And if nobody new joins, well, then I guess we didn't do a good job. Anyways, welcome again to another episode of the crowdsourced politics news roundup. I am the host and moderator of CSP Cypher, and today we have a lot to cover. We're going to cover what happened in the House the last few days, what's going on with SCOTUS and some of the new cases, what kind of things is Biden trying to do, and what is the Senate doing while the House is in shambles. But before we get into that, let us start with some announcements. So the first things first is that we're going to push this every time I go live, is that I will be at Modern Day Debate Con on November 5th, debating Actual Justice Warrior at 3 p.m. in Dallas. Information can be found on Twitter, Facebook, etc. We'll drop some information elsewhere. It is scheduled on the Discord, so you can get the information there as well. So we're going to be debating him on whether or not the left is soft on crime. And obviously the answer is no, but you know, these debates wouldn't happen if there wasn't disagreement. So we're going to debate him on it. I'm going to come from it from a sociological perspective and a maybe we should be tough on crime, sort of, but we really need to address some of the systemic issues that lead people to commit violence. and crime. A lot of crime is petty crime, and that's the thing that's got people up in arms with, things like shoplifting and that sort of stuff. Those things can be addressed without necessarily locking people up, but that's what we got to do. So we're going to be doing that on, again, November 5th in Dallas. Tickets are for sale. You can eat dinner with me and a bunch of other people if you buy the special ticket. Those other people include Chud Logic, Destiny, Actual Justice Warrior, Not So Erudite, among others. I can't remember the other people off the top of my head because I am not familiar with them, but they are also pretty big in the debate community. So should turn out for that if you're in the area. Should be a good time. The other thing is I am going to start bringing back up my podcast episodes of Praxis Run. I met some good people when I was at Texas Tribune Fest, and it really got me interested in doing that again. So I'm going to try to start doing that here in the next couple of months, and that's going to be a regular occurrence as well. Not sure if those will be live streamed or if I'll just record them and post them on YouTube and the podcast channels or whatever the case may be, but they will be happening. I will be interviewing activists from Extinction Rebellion. I'll be interviewing some activists from some gun rights groups, some anti-gun rights groups, or some anti-gun groups. Hopefully, we'll be interviewing people from the Appleseed Project and from Austin Justice Coalition. So these are things that I'm wanting to do. I want people to get engaged in politics, and I want to be as open about it as possible. So we're going to be interviewing people that are activists from across the political spectrum. I will do my due diligence to make sure I'm not interviewing any freaking Stalinist or Nazis. I'm not wanting to give either of those types of people a platform, but we'll get other conservatives and the like a platform a little bit to just engage in that kind of thing, to understand them a bit better and maybe bridge divides when we can, and if we can't, at least understand each other better, to do effective arguments. So we're going to be interviewing a bunch of people. Again, next couple of months or so, we're going to get started on that. First one will be probably with some of the activists at Extinction Rebellion that I have met while attending Texas Tribune Fest. And so that's what we're going to be starting off with, because they were easy to reach out to. The other people are a little bit busier, so we'll see how that goes on that. One of the other things that I am doing personally is that I am getting engaged in direct party politics and starting to get more active within the Austin, Travis County area within the Democratic politics, internal politics, not just, going door to door for people, but, actual engagement within party politics a little bit to a degree. So we'll be talking about that on the show as well. Potential for that is that maybe we'll be creating a Austin specific or Travis County specific show that will happen monthly or bi-weekly, whatever the case may be. It depends on what the other people that I'm doing this with are up for, and that won't be on this channel, but it will be available on YouTube and the like, interviewing people from across the lib-left political spectrum about different issues impacting local politics for Travis County and Austin in Texas. So that's another thing that we're going to be doing. Hopefully, again, this is still in the works, and it's just a preliminary thing right now that I've been thinking about doing and got some buy-in with some people that work with the Travis County Democratic Party. And so we'll see how that goes. So that's another thing to be on the lookout for. And what else? Not much else going on with us right now. Really just preparing for that debate on November 5th. And so we got nothing else to really announce. So let's go ahead and get started with the show proper here. So the news is coming at us fast this week, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it to not waste any time here. Starting up with first, U.S. politics, federal level. So Republican infighting between minority of hard-right MAGA members of the House and non-MAGA members reached a fever pitch just last week. The outcome shocked observers and seemingly all of the Republican House members. We'll start tonight's cast with a look into what is happening. So the Roundup reported last week that it looked like House Republicans would let the U.S. government shut down Saturday at midnight. As time wore on, Republican hardliners insisted on adding poison pill amendments to appropriation bills. They drafted bills that violated the agreement negotiated with President Biden when fights over the debt ceiling bill almost shut down the government in May, as well as put our country into default. At the time, McCarthy committed to the spending negotiated with the president, and 2/3 of Republicans voted to pass the debt ceiling bill. But MAGA members of the House responded with anger, and despite the majority vote to accept the debt ceiling bill, they immediately began plotting to strip out the negotiated spending. The House did manage to pass 4 of 12 bills necessary to fund the government for the next fiscal year, but they bickered and fought tooth and nail about every single one. They took to the floor of the House and threw pop shots at each other. Throughout the process, Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy tried to keep his committees, throughout this process, Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy tried to keep his commitments to the extremists in his conference while basically ignoring the rest of his members. This caused even more public bickering, with non-MAGA members complaining about the MAGA members to the press. Meanwhile, the Senate moved forward with its own continuing resolution, a stopgap measure to fund the government while the parties worked out the disagreements, waited for the House to come to its senses. In literally the 11th hour before a shutdown would have occurred, McCarthy managed to pass a continuing resolution with the help of House Democrats. The continuing resolution passed the House with a vote of 395 to 91, with all Democrat votes saying yes. The angry reaction from the MAGA wing, most of whom are part of the House Freedom Caucus, was immediate. Freedom Caucus members are hardliners who are staunchly against working across the aisle on pretty much anything. Their actions are driven by their relationship to the former president, who has pulled strings behind the scenes for weeks in an effort to shut down the government. Their rhetoric to the press was that if there was a shutdown, it would be the fault of Democrats. A laughable contention, to say the least. Democrats were dead set against the shutdown and accepted the continuing resolution despite there being no emergency funding for Ukraine, which was a concession McCarthy was forced to make to the Freedom Caucus in order to keep the government open. Nonetheless, the Democrats joined 130 Republicans to pass the continuing resolution to keep the government open for 45 additional days. The Senate immediately passed the CR, and President Biden signed the CR into law at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just half an hour before a shutdown would have occurred. Now, the drama around the speaker's seat is something that happened immediately after this. The most visible members of the Freedom Caucus were predictably incensed that McCarthy worked with Democrats to keep the government open. Representative Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida, immediately began threatening to make a motion to vacate the speaker's seat. Gaetz appeared on various media outlets over the weekend saying that McCarthy working with Democrats to fund the government was unacceptable. He said he would move to vacate the speaker's seat. Gaetz glibly told the media that McCarthy could work with his new boss, Hakeem Jeffries, but he wouldn't be doing it from the speaker's seat. On Monday, Gaetz introduced a resolution to vacate the speaker. On Tuesday, the House gathered for a vote on Gaetz' motion. Now, there had been some talk over the weekend that McCarthy would rely on Democrats' votes to keep him in the speaker's chair. But McCarthy had spent the weekend condemning the Democrats and trying to shift the blame for the chaotic process to pass the CR from his own caucus to Jeffries and the Democrats. Anybody that was paying attention to this process at all should know that that was a laughable proposition. Even as Gaetz queued up the motion to vacate, McCarthy dismissed the notion that he would be removed from the speaker's role, saying on Twitter, quote, "Bring it on." He maintained an outward attitude of confidence right up until the House voted to vacate the chair. Some pundits have said that Some pundits have said that Gates caught flat-footed when the vote resulted in McCarthy's removal. He felt sure that Democrats would keep him in the Speaker's role. But the Democrats ultimately sided with 8 members of the Freedom Caucus, and for the first time in the history of our government, the Speaker of the House was removed. Kevin McCarthy had led the position for just, getting tongue-tied here, everybody. Sorry about this. Kevin McCarthy had held the position for just 9 months, almost to the day. The last 2 Republican speakers, Paul Ryan and John Boehner, retired from Congress after clashes with their right wing, and there were rumors now that McCarthy may resign as well. The deposed speaker is not barred from running again, but McCarthy has said that he isn't interested in trying to reclaim the speaker's gavel. In the immediate aftermath of McCarthy's removal, it was clear that no one, including Matt Gaetz, had a plan for what to do next. There was an almost immediate motion to recess the House for 1 week, while the Republican conference tries to figure out who should be the next speaker. The recess has caused even deeper bitterness in the Republican conference, and those who aren't hardliners and extremists are indicating that they're fed up. According to Politico, the history-making spectacle that played out on the House floor on Tuesday amounted to stepping on a rake heading into an election year, as one Republican lawmaker put it. McCarthy's loss to 8 rebel Republicans is the latest and most acute example of how a party now McCarthy's loss to 8 rebel Republicans is the latest and most acute example of a party now so racked by division that it cannot govern itself, let alone the country. The GOP's tiny House majority and poor communication across the Capitol has rendered it feeble and feckless. When Gaetz finally made good on his long-standing threats to force a vote to topple McCarthy, his Republican colleagues were so fed up with him they wouldn't let him debate from within their own caucus. Gaetz was banished to the minority Democratic side of the room. In other words, he had to use the mic the Democrats gave him. Some people say that this was a bad move on Democrats' part, but as I described last night in the Not Another Leftist podcast, I think that was probably actually a decent move done by Democrats to hurry up and get this thing over with, rather than letting it go into like some sort of shouting match. It still revealed the divisions, and it sped the process up a little bit, in my opinion. Now, lawmakers say that Gaetz' successful fight to remove McCarthy from the speakership has cost him in his own conference. On Tuesday, reports said House Republicans were considering expelling Gaetz from the caucus entirely. Quote, "I'd love to have him out of the conference," Nebraska Republican Representative Don Bacon told reporters on Tuesday. He shouldn't be in the Republican Party. Representative Garrett Graves, Republican of Louisiana, said the repercussions for Gaetz would be pursued in the conference. Within a House GOP that has in recent years devoured its own, ostracizing members who have spoken out against former President Donald Trump and the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol, so far, only Gaetz seems to be at risk of formal dismissal. Note here that we are talking about dismissal from the conference, in other words, not being allowed to caucus with the GOP formally within the House. This is not a removal from the House itself, just for clarity's sake. Now, we have an interim speaker in McHenry, and he has taken the gavel. And according to Reuters, immediately following Tuesday's 216 to 210 ouster vote, Republican Representative Patrick McHenry, a McCarthy ally, was appointed acting Speaker pro tem. He can serve for only a very limited time, up to 3 legislative days in this case. The acting Speaker pro tem's duties are very vague, according to a guide to Chamber's rules and procedures. Quote, "That person may exercise such authorities of the office of Speaker as may be necessary and appropriate pending the election of a Speaker or Speaker pro tem. In other words, he can pretty much only oversee a election of another Speaker, not very much else. Now, there might be some wiggle room, legally speaking, on doing other things here, but generally speaking, this is what he is limited to. And we are in new territory with this. This has never happened before in our country's history. Again, Republican Representative Kelly Armstrong told reporters that McHenry's main task will be to get us a new speaker. Any further, he said, would spark a move to oust McHenry himself as well. This division among Republicans is unprecedented, and so far there are no signs that the chaos will subside. And this has led to an extreme disarray to the GOP's concerns and this extreme disarray has led concerns for GOP heading into the 2024 election as well. According to Politico, the longer the disarray drags on, the tougher next year's elections are likely to become. Several battleground seat incumbents openly acknowledge that Gates' successful drive to boot McCarthy, quote, weakens our position. The next GOP speaker, whomever he or she is, will almost certainly have to rely on Democrats to fund the government, given the antipathy on the right for stopgap spending bills as well. Republicans hope that the House control could lead to big policy wins, are close to being dashed and forgotten. And furthermore, until a House Speaker is installed, it is unlikely that further action will be taken on bills to fund the government as well. Lawmakers are facing a November 17th deadline to provide more money, or again, face a partial government shutdown. Partial here because some parts of the government are mandatory report parts of the government, military, police, etc., and other things. These parts of the government will have to report for duty and still have the government function, but will not be paid while doing so. This includes the Federal Aviation Committee, This includes the Federal Aviation Administration, which controls traffic controllers. And famously, traffic controllers during the last extended government shutdown walked off the job, preventing flights from taking off, except in some extreme circumstances, which led to people not being able to travel and brought the economy almost to a grinding halt, which is why the last shutdown was ended eventually, or at least one of the bigger reasons that this happens. So what is going to happen next? Well, the House's 221 Republicans and 212 Democrats are huddling privately to figure out their next steps, both politically and legislatively. Each party was expected to try to settle on a candidate for Speaker. That's easy for Democrats. They are solidly behind Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who ran for Speaker in January against McCarthy and other candidates. Given the increasing bitterness in their conference, Republicans will no doubt have a harder time settling on a candidate. They will be forced to negotiate with a small group of hardline MAGA extremists who continue to seek very deep cuts in federal spending, despite the majority passage of the debt ceiling bill. The House now finds itself in an unprecedented moment. Let us now turn over to NBC News with some further reporting on this chaos. Oops.
This morning, Congress is at a standstill and scrambling for a speaker.
Is there any guidance you can give folks about what happens next?
I'm sorry, I can't at this point.
The House out of session until next Tuesday, even as Congress has just over 40 days to reach a deal and prevent a shutdown. Military salaries, critical government services, and U.S. aid for Ukraine, all hanging in the balance.
We need to do this fast.
So one thing I want to bring up here, I'm going to rewind this a little bit. So one thing I want to bring up here specifically is that the there's wide agreement about paying military members and offering critical government services. The primary thing that there's a lot of disagreement on, and the population is moving away from, is U.S. aid for Ukraine. As the Ukraine war drags on longer and the gains that the Ukrainian military are making becomes thinner, that support for Ukraine aid will diminish. This doesn't mean that Ukraine aid won't happen, but it might take a different flavor than the U.S. government simply guaranteeing loans and promises to the Ukrainian government and giving them equipment directly. We might see some more indirect forms of aid, whether it be, selling equipment to allies at maybe a reduced cost, and then those allies turning around and giving them more equipment that they have on hand, or something of that nature. Maybe a conglomerate of NATO nations coming together to all guarantee a loan for Ukraine rather than it just being backstopped by primarily the U.S. government. Again, most of the aid that the Ukrainians have received so far has been in-kind aid. That means that they've gotten equipment, loan guarantees, and supplies from the U.S. government, particularly in terms of ammunition and, again, heavy equipment. Because the government does accrual accounting, this is denominated in dollars so that the government can understand everything that goes in and out of its pocketbooks, but it's not like a direct cash advance to the Ukrainian government. It's not like a blank check. Most of this, again, is in the form of equipment, guaranteed loans for equipment that just basically circles back to the United States and other countries and produces jobs in manufacturing of arms and equipment. So this notion that it's either Ukrainian aid or anything else is really not what it is, even at a surface level. But on top of that, most of the people that are for getting rid of Ukrainian aid aren't for giving aid to the people in the United States or other countries in their home country. It is a false dichotomy. It is a false choice being offered by these people. Well, let's go ahead and let this continue on here for another 20 seconds or so.
We need to do this fast because we're wasting time on the floor right now.
Moderate Republicans furious at their far-right colleagues for ousting Speaker Kevin McCarthy in that historic move.
The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
And he's gone.
Now.
All right. So that's what we have there. Now, the leaders of both parties, actually, let's bring it back here. So that's what we have there. Now, the leaders of both parties will have to decide when they are ready to enter into the process of electing a speaker. The January endeavor was sloppy, as McCarthy, for days, could not get enough votes to win and had to endure 15 rounds of voting. It would be at least as chaotic this time for Republicans, unless they conclude that such chaos is creating a public backlash that could doom their electoral prospects, or that could doom their election prospects in 2024, and they unite around a candidate. Now, who wants to be Speaker of the House, though, under all these things? Not only who wants to be, but who can be. So under the U.S. Constitution, the House Speaker does not have to be a member of Congress. Some Republicans have floated the name of former President Donald Trump for the job. After initially saying he was focused on his presidential run, Trump is considering making a trip to the Capitol, according to reporting from the Rolling Stone. Such a visit would be the first time the former president has visited the building since a mob of his supporters breached it in a violent riot on January 6th of 2021. Some would even say an insurrection. Some people have been found guilty of an insurrectionist plot. We'll let you decide. And multiple outlets have reported on Thursday, today, that the former president is mulling a trip next week ahead of the vote. Politico noted that he is open to pitching himself as a candidate, citing a Republican familiar with internal discussions. A source familiar with Trump's recent private discussions told Rolling Stones that Trump has indeed uttered that he is open to the possibility of a speakership run. Some members of the House have confirmed they will run for speaker as well. It's reported that one of those members is Steve Scalise, though he has blood cancer and will be getting treatment for the illness in the immediate future. Representative Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, will also make a bid for the gavel. We should note here that both of these people are actually fairly popular within their conference. Jim Jordan for his rough and tumble, antagonistic positions when it comes to trying to take on Democrats within the House Judiciary Committee, especially under Trump and after Trump's removal or loss in 2020. And Steve Scalise because he's remained a stalwart of Republican and conservatism despite getting shot, and partly because he was shot by a left-wing lunatic a few years ago. That left-wing lunatic went to a baseball game and opened fire on Republicans, trying to target Republican members specifically because of issues that he was having with the way the government was being done. So there's crazies, right? And you get some solidarity when you don't become anti-gun or anti-conservative or change your political beliefs in despite of a personal attack that you suffered. Now let us turn back over though to CBS News here, or ABC News. Let us now turn back to ABC News here for some additional reporting.
Now, it's possible this field could continue to grow. Oklahoma Republican Congressman Kevin Hern is now gauging support, also considering getting in, putting his hat into the ring to run for speaker. Republicans, though, are hoping to avoid another embarrassment and get this done quickly. They're eyeing early next week, but getting all of House Republicans on the same page is not going to be easy. And many Republicans that I've talked with up here are skeptical that they can actually pull this off that quickly. They fear, Robin, that this could drag on.
Yeah, so we'll note here, like we have already said, that it's likely going to have to be a few rounds of voting. There's going to be some horse trading, especially if two people are engaged within the House Speaker fight this time around. The moderate wing of the Republican Party, to say that is kind of, it just means they're not too much. They're not too wedded to MAGA specifically, but they're pretty much online with almost everything that is on the agenda. Aren't really here for the, what's a good way to say this? They aren't here for the type of people that are making a circus out of the process and basically not wanting to govern anything at all here. Okay, so that's where they're kind of at, and because those people actually exist within the conference, it's possible that Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan will have a fight on their hands because they might not be able to coalesce a large enough portion of those members into a solid block to win the speakership. And given that the Republican conference has majorities so thinly, it's probably not going to be one and done unless during this week that they're in recess right now, there's a lot of backroom deals that are made and they come out and they just do it like that. But this has still got another 30 seconds or so let's go ahead and let the rest of it play out.
That is the fear, Mary, but some are saying they want to change the rules so this can't happen again.
Yeah, Robin, we're hearing a growing chorus now calling to change the rules so that a speaker can't be ousted as easily as Kevin McCarthy was. You'll recall that to gain enough support to become speaker, McCarthy struck a deal agreeing to make it so that only one member could force a vote on his removal. Now, some that I've spoken with up here say they won't support the next speaker until they agree to change these rules so that the speaker can't be kicked out so easily, Robin.
All right, Mary.
All right, so that's the end of that little segment here. Now, let's talk about this rule. So the rule was really pushed by 20 or so of members of the Freedom Caucus. This is MTG, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, Chip Roy, among others, that really wanted it to be like basically a sword of Damocles that hung over the head of McCarthy so they could push him around and kind of get what they wanted. And it's bit them in the ass. I mean, it hasn't bit them specifically in the ass, but it's bit Republicans in the ass by making the conference more chaotic, by making it to where they can't get bills passed, by making it to where the people's business is not being done, and showing that this deep division that is within the Republican Party right now, partly due to the fact that they don't have that much power since they only control the House and by very thin margin, that they aren't able to get things done. They aren't able to get things that people want done. Very, very few things, because of how narrow this victory is. Compare that to the 2020 to 2022 House, where things were getting done on a bipartisan basis. With Biden, with the CHIPS Act, the infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, some movement on guns, some movement on a number of other different things that are very much needed in order for the economy to have rebounded from COVID, as well as to our defenses and our ability to produce things at home, given another possible global pandemic or war overseas that could impact supply chains. All these things were very important, and I'm sure that people actually care about them. They might not know about it as much as we would like, you know, we being people that are politically engaged every day, which is why I do this program, partly because I want to give people the kind of information that these things are important and hopefully break that bubble a little bit to show that, yes, things that passed 2 years ago are positively impacting you today. Clear example of this: the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act gave people subsidies and city subsidies in order to lower the cost for new equipment, things that are more energy efficient. One of those things is the ability to go out and buy a new dishwasher or washer dryer or whatever that meet a certain rating and have, I want to say, like instant rebates of like a couple $100 on those items, in order to, you know, help fight climate change, but also in order to encourage built in America. Those two things combined will save people money and also generate economic activity, which is what we want. We want that to happen a lot because it helps everybody out. And so if more people are aware of these things, then we can actually get more things accomplished because people's material conditions are directly impacted. That's not to say that everything is rosy, mind you. No, of course not. Not everything is peachy. But these things are important. And the fact that Republicans can't get anything done whatsoever, especially in the House, is telling that maybe they just don't want to govern. But let us continue on, though. So CBS News reported that the immediate challenge for Republicans is moving past the extraordinary strife that's plagued their conference in recent weeks, which we've been talking about this entire segment. The raw feelings were apparent at a closed-door meeting Tuesday evening, where members unloaded their anger at the 8 Republicans who joined with Democrats to depose of McCarthy. Representative Mike Kelly, Republican of Pennsylvania, Representative Mike Kelly, Republican of Pennsylvania, pointed at the lawmakers who voted against McCarthy and said, quote, "I've never been part of a worse team," according to a Republican in the room who has granted anonymity to discuss the private session. Reuters reported that even though many lawmakers saw the day coming, they were stunned that Republicans actually dumped their own leader. Quote, "I've been here for a while and I've seen a lot, but I've never seen this," Democratic Representative Jim McGovern told Reuters. House Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries urged, quote, traditional Republicans in the House to do the following, quote, "Walk away from MAGA extremism and join us in partnership for the good of the country," a reference to a former President Donald Trump's Make America Great Again slogan. This is called the Grand Coalition idea. In other words, we'll enter a deal, Democrats and Republicans, people that want government to function on both sides, come together and enter in a grand coalition government within the House in order to get things passed. Funding the government, doing things against China, funding Ukraine, or helping fund Ukraine's war against Russia, helping to fund Ukraine's defense against Russia aggression, among other things. Whether or not this will play out is still to be determined, but it's what we would like to see, kind of. And I say kind of because, you know, at the end of the day, I don't really want a lot of the things the Republicans want, but what I want less is for the government to not function at all. I don't want the government to shut down. I want bills to be passed. I want good bills to be passed. I want ones that people can agree on. 60% of Americans agree that we need some sort of, universal background check system. 60-70% of Americans agree that we need to lower healthcare costs. 60-70% of Americans agree that we need to do a number of different things. Reduce marijuana conviction rates, legalize marijuana, lower prescription drug prices, get more K through 12 education funding, get more universal child care funding, etc., etc., etc. If a grand bargain can be reached where some of these things become a reality, maybe improving the earned income tax credit, especially for people that have children, it'd be a good thing. So one can dream, even if it seems a little bit too West Wing. Shout out to some of the nerdies out there, some of the older ones that watch this program. Even if it seems a little bit too much like that, one can dream though, right? One can dream. But it's probably not going to happen. Maybe not. It's unlikely. Simply because that kind of grand bargain would specifically help President Biden going into 2024. So it is what it is. Continuing on, though. The crisis also significantly detracts from Republicans' hopes to fix the public's focus on an impeachment inquiry into Democratic President Joe Biden and immigration troubles at the southwest U.S. border with Mexico. So, yeah. Let me read it again. So the crisis also significantly detracts from Republicans' hopes to fix the public's focus on an impeachment inquiry into Democratic President Joe Biden. They want Joe Biden to be investigated. They want to tarnish his ability to go into 2024. They want this, the narrative that he's somehow beholden to China or any number of different things, and he's a corrupt SOB, despite the fact that we have little to no evidence of any of their claims. Granted, his son Hunter traded on his name. That's bad. Hunter should probably be strung up and put in jail, given anything that he did that was actually legal. A lot of it's not. That's the problem. But they want to be able to diminish Biden's chances of winning in 2024. Not all of these people may be on board with Trump, but they're all against Biden. As McConnell said during the January 6th stuff, let's see if I can do this. They could pass the Green New Deal, and that would be a tragedy. A little bit there. Again, they don't like Democrats. They like Democrats less than they like doing things that are good. So that's the problem here. And not only that, but it also takes eyes to an extent off of what's happening at the border. And border issue is actually pummeling Biden pretty badly. Say what you want about the busing of migrants from Texas to New York City and other northeastern states, or from Florida to them, or other southern border towns to California, etc. It is negatively impacting people's perception of what is happening with immigration. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe you think it's wrong for Republicans to do this, but it is a masterful political play. And anything that detracts from that is making that play less effective. So they want to keep focusing on it. Now, you and I might think that the reason that we're having this immigration problem is partly due to policies that Trump enacted and decades of neglect of trying to fix the southern border as well as immigration reform generally. Republicans squashed it in 2006 and in 2012 when there was the possibility of having comprehensive immigration reform. Gang of 8 became Gang of 6, and then therefore it died. Thanks, Rubio, you fucking douchebag. But these are the things that we're having to deal with. Because we have to deal with this, it is negatively impacting Joe Biden's ability to win and making him do things that might seem a bit Trump-esque. For example, the border wall is being constructed. There's some fencing going up under key points there's construction of border fencing at key points that the Customs and Border Patrol and ICE say that are issues, that are having issues of people crossing there. You and I probably agree that it won't work. It might slow it down a little bit, but ultimately it'll be easily circumvented, and it's ultimately not where the point should be. But people want something done. You and I might say that, hey, Congress needs to get off its ass, authorize work visas for people that are seeking asylum, and also change the law so that we can either quickly get their cases adjudicated or have more say on the border agents' own task to like send them back and deny their asylum claims just outright because they're not believable enough or whatever, or maybe change the law about asylum seeking so that they have to apply for asylum in a third country that's a safe harbor country or within their own countries. But all those things right now, if Biden were to do it, and he's tried to do some of those things, are illegal. The courts have stopped him because that is not what the US law says. Now, Republicans might be fine with that. Just ignore the courts, make them enforce it. But liberals typically actually listen to the courts for most part, and they don't like to abuse power. They constitutionally are like, this is why a lot of people say Democrats don't have spines, because they don't like doing those things, right? They don't like doing it. So that's where we're at. And so Biden is doing something in order to show that something is being done. And it's helping Republicans. Every time that he adds fencing, Republicans will be like, see, the border wall is needed. Anytime he does anything like that, anytime he says something that like shows that maybe he wasn't completely honest or forthright about what he knew about his son, they can be like, see, he's trying to cover something up. And all this fighting about the speakership is making people not pay attention to that as much. Now, continuing on to wrap this up a little bit, for their part, McCarthy and his fellow Republicans had hoped to make those twin issues the centerpiece of the 2024 congressional and presidential campaigns, along with inflation. But the dysfunction of the House Republicans has taken center stage, and at this moment, it's impossible to say how long it will last. And as we said, that's a good thing for Democrats and a bad thing for Republicans. But that, my friends, concludes this segment of the News Roundup. Ooh, I need some water. Got the burps there for a little bit. That's a good segment, though. That was quality. Quality! All right. If you're just joining us, though, welcome everybody. This is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We do this, unless stated otherwise, every Thursday, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the kind of news, with the news of the last week that the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. I got tongue-tied there. I don't know why. So we do this every Thursday, like I said. We also are doing other things. We're going to be doing a series of interviews that will hopefully be a recurring segment, hopefully monthly at the very least. We're going to start that back up, interviewing activists. We're doing more debates. Hey, if you want to debate me, contact me. You can join the Discord. Find me on Discord and contact me. I am willing to debate most things with anybody. I don't get into conspiracy debating. So if the earth is flat, did we really land on the moon? Like those aren't interest me. Policy though, if you want to debate policy, if you want to debate criminal justice, if you want to debate whether or not the country would be better led by so and so, those are things I'm interested in. So if you want to debate me, contact me. And we're also looking for more video editors. We have a couple right now that we're working with, but having another one would help out. So if you or someone would like to be a video editor and like to get paid for said video editing, let me know and we can work something out. But let us continue on with the newscast. Moving away from the dysfunctional of the House, let's talk about some news from the Senate. Starting up with Dianne Feinstein's passing. So the trailblazing senator from California, Dianne Feinstein, passed away last week. CBS News reported that Feinstein, who was 90 years old, died at her home in Washington, D.C. after experiencing a spate of health issues that left her absent from the Senate for roughly 3 months earlier this year. She cast her final vote in the Senate last Thursday morning. Feinstein spent 30 years in the U.S. Senate. As the Senate convened Friday morning, the Democratic leader held a moment of silence for Feinstein. Her desk was draped in a black cloth with a vase of white roses, a long-time Senate tradition when a senator dies. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, praised Feinstein as a giant in the Senate who served as a role model for women across the country. Quote, "The women in the Senate stand on Dianne's shoulders," Schumer said, choking up at moments. Dianne didn't just push down doors that were closed for women, he said. She held them open for generations of women after her to follow. Democrat Nancy Pelosi noted Feinstein's history-making roles as the first female mayor of San Francisco and first woman to lead the Senate Intelligence Committee. Quote, "Dianne's extraordinary career will continue to inspire countless young women and girls to pursue public service for generations to come," she had said. Democratic Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, said that, quote, "There's simply nobody who possessed the pose, gravitas, and fierceness of Dianne Feinstein," Newsom had said. Reuters reported that the death of the trailblazing U.S. Senator presented her fellow Democrats with 2 questions on Friday. Who will replace her in the chamber, and who will take her seat on the committee that approves federal judges? Filling the 90-year-old lawmaker's seat on the Senate Judiciary Committee touches one of the most critical levers of partisan power in Washington and will require cooperation from Republicans. This is specifically because of the fact that the Senate is split 50-50 and they're in a power sharing agreement. According to reporting from the Christian Science Monitor, Newsom selected LaFonza Butler, a Democratic strategist and advisor to Kamala Harris's 2020 presidential campaign, to fill Feinstein's seat. In choosing Miss Butler, Newsom fulfilled his pledge to appoint a black woman if Miss Feinstein's seat becomes open. Butler will be the only black woman serving in the U.S. Senate and the first openly gay Butler will be the only black woman serving in the U.S. Senate and the first openly LGBTQ person to represent California in the chamber. Newsom said in a statement that the priorities for Ms. Feinstein fought for in Congress, reproductive freedom, equal protection, and safety from gun violence, were under assault in the nation. Quote, LaFonza will carry the baton left by Senator Feinstein and continue to break glass ceilings and fight for all California in Washington, D.C., he said. Butler leads Emily's List, a political organization that supports Democratic women candidates who favor abortion rights. Butler was a longtime resident of California before relocating to Maryland to take the position with Emily's List. Her appointment sets up a potentially tricky political calculus in the crowded 2024 contest to succeed Feinstein, which has been underway since the beginning of the year. Butler was sworn in this week and will serve until the 2024 election. Newsom's spokesman, Anthony York, said the governor did not ask Butler to commit to staying out of the 2024 race. And even if he did, he wouldn't have the ability to do so, to enforce it. That's not how this works. Excuse me. Democrat House members from California, Katie Porter, Barbara Lee, and Adam Schiff are running for the Senate seat themselves. So that concludes that segment. I don't know what's going on right now. In other news in the Senate, we have Senate delegation visiting China. So Reuters reports that a bipartisan U.S. Senate delegation will visit China, Japan, and South Korea in October. The 6-senator group will be co-led by Republican Mike Crapo, whose office said earlier the trip is planned for next week. The senators hope to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Schumer has repeatedly urged the United States to take a harder line on China. He urged lawmakers earlier this year to begin new legislation aimed at addressing concerns about the world's second biggest economy. The trip will follow visits by a series of Biden administration officials, including Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, in August. Schumer's office said that Gina Raimondo. Oh, Jesus Christ. Pronounce.
Raimondo.
Oh, Raimondo. I was right. God damn it. All right. This trip will follow visits by a series of Biden administration officials, including Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, in August. Schumer's office said the trip's goal is to advance U.S. economic and national security interests in the region. It will feature meetings with government leaders and business leaders from each country and from U.S. companies operating in each country. Other senators on the trip include Republican Bill Cassidy and John Kennedy, and Democrat Maggie Hassan and John Ossoff. China welcomes Schumer's visit. For their part, China welcomes Schumer's visits and hopes it will deepen the Senate's objective understanding of China and facilitate dialogue between the nation's legislative agencies, China's foreign ministry said on Wednesday. A lot of the things that Biden has done and a lot of the laws that actually got passed were to combat Chinese influence within the United States, as well as their economic prowess, and to re-insource goods and services into the United States, specifically when it comes to chip manufacturing and other primary things that are needed for national security, including medical supplies and the like. And so a lot of this back and forth between the legislators and their Chinese counterparts is going to be focusing on that sort of aspect. And, you know, something that could come out of this is maybe a little bit less saber rattling, maybe. But given the fact that Xi Jinping has really consolidated power around himself, the likelihood of that having any actual inroads, in my opinion, is pretty small. That's not to say that this won't maybe tamp down on rhetoric or maybe, reassert the one China policy that might reduce tensions within the South China Sea between Taiwan and China, and maybe not lead to any escalating of tensions, at least in the near term. So some of those things will be good, but it's not going to nothing really grand is going to come out of it with like the US saying, oh, okay, we'll get our computer chips made in China, and Apple, you can just operate in China all you want. It doesn't matter anymore. Like, don't expect things like that to happen. And it shouldn't. China shouldn't be so reliant on American companies producing goods and services for export to the Western market, because that makes them an export country, which leaves them vulnerable to sanctions, specifically if tensions flare up because of them wanting to exert their traditional influence around their neighbors. We're talking Philippines, South Korea, North Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, South Korea. I think I already said that one, but Vietnam, Australia, New Zealand, etc. These are all places that China had a lot of influence historically, before the West, in some of those Western war countries, before the United States got involved. But they want to go back to that, so it's not going to reconfigure everything, right? But it could help tamp down just a little bit. But they're still going to exert influence. They're still going to try to do propaganda campaigns. They're still going to try to, integrate Hong Kong, fully integrate Taiwan, either through hard power or soft power. Direct military conflict is another possibility there. All these things are on the table. And so, take what this delegation is as a grain of salt, not with a grain of salt. Like, take this delegation for what it is, a first step in a long process that may not bear fruit for a while. Right. But with that concludes this segment of the News Roundup. Now, if there's anything you want us to see us cover on the News Roundup, you can let us know through numerous different ways. As we said earlier, you can join our Discord and hit me up on Discord. That's the easiest way to do so. I'm always on Discord. I'm always either arguing with people or discussing things with people, either on my server or across other servers. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. You can still hit me up on Twitter. I don't really use it as much anymore, but I still have a presence there. So you can go ahead and hit me there at Crowdsourced Poll. If you do Mastodon or Blue Sky, you can hit me up at CSP Cypher on Blue Sky and at CSP Cypher at federated.press on Mastodon. So those are the easiest ways. Those are the easiest way to get a hold of me. All right. Now let's move on to some interesting developments coming out of the Biden administration itself. So Biden, according to CNN, Biden administration is making a game-changing modifications to the foster care system that will enable family members to care for children in foster care more easily. The administration is also proposing new rules to protect LGBTQ+ youth and expand legal services to those at risk of entering the child welfare system. During a call with reporters, Domestic Policy Council Director Nia Tandon said the three new rules would have, quote, profound impact on child welfare in America. The rules represent one of the most substantial advances in child welfare in a generation. They will be truly transformative for families, Tandon said. The first rule, which takes effect immediately, makes it easier for family members or kinship caregivers to foster children and provides them with more financial support. Quote, we're going to start to give family a chance to really be a family for these kids, especially for grandparents who oftentimes carry so much of a load and never get recognized for what they do, Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Baraka said. In practice, Baraka said, it could mean that aunts and uncles will now have to jump through fewer hoops to care for their nieces and nephews who will have been removed from their homes. It also raises age limits for foster parents, which will allow more grandparents to care for their grandchildren. This is really a good thing. A lot of the issues that plague the foster care system are the fact that they don't have enough people to care for the kids. Some of the people that care for the kids are just pieces of shit, and they don't have enough funding to care for kids. If they allow more family members to foster the kids, and alleviate the financial burden of actually caring for kids in the family. They might, some of these nieces, some of these uncles and grandparents might be on fixed incomes or might have kids of their own that limit their budgets. If you expand that and allow the foster care system to pay these people to keep families together, that is going to have measurable positive impacts on those kids' lives directly. Make no mistake about it. That is a huge change here. Very huge. This is one of the better things that have come out of the administration thus far, in my opinion. Not only that, though, the rule also provides kinship caregivers with the same level of financial assistance that any other foster care provider receives, which is exactly what I'm talking about. So a grandparent, a aunt, uncle, third cousin, twice removed from the mother's side, like these people being given the direct financial support to care for those kids will be huge impact on these people's lives. I can't tell you how many times I have heard stories from social workers that had to remove kids from their, their aunt's care because the aunt didn't have enough money to care for the kids. And had that aunt just got the money that would go to any other foster parent in the system, they would have been perfectly fine. They could have moved into a bigger place instead of having like a 2-bedroom apartment, house 5 kids, for example. Just having that extra $1,200 or whatever that it is. Each state's going to have a different threshold, right? But just having that extra money would impact them immensely in a positive way. It's very big. Very big. Additionally, states will now begin their own process for adopting the simpler and more streamlined licensing standards for kinship caregivers. There are also proposed changes to how LGBTQ youth are placed with foster caregivers. An administration official speaking on background said that the proposal would ensure that every child who identifies as LGBTQ+, quote, receives placement in foster care while they will be safe from any mistreatment, abuse, or hostility just because of who they are. A wide body of research shows us that LGBTQ youth are overrepresented in the foster care because they're more likely to face rejection from their families, and once in the foster care system, they are often faced discrimination from the placements that they received, the official said. And this should be obvious to everybody because a lot of foster care systems in the United States are run by churches, evangelical churches to be specific, trying to place kids with religious families. And these are the kind of people that think you can pray away the gay. These are the kind of people that don't like gay people. Not to say that every single person involved in the foster care system who is religious is this way, but the likelihood of them being this way is increased because of how the system is designed. Again, if you're helping kids and you're not being a dick, I have no problem with you. I have no problem if you're evangelical. I have no problem if you're Muslim, atheist, Hindu, Sikh, Native American, spiritualist. I don't care as long as you're not abusing the child that you are being placed in charge of and getting money from the government from to do so. Again, it's not much. You can't live off of it. It's supplemental. It's meant to help you ease some of the burden of raising a child that's not yours, right? But there are these problems. These problems exist. In fact, there's been numerous reports of, people in the foster care system beating their foster charges to death because of the assumption that they might be gay or queer or whatever else. And this is real. This is real. Not to get too personal about this, okay? I was in foster care from the ages of about 3 to about 7. I don't remember the exact time frame, but it was about 4 years, okay? I was placed with a charismatic Pentecostal family. They were fine, mostly. They believed, Jesus, magic, and all that jazz. Believed you could pray and you'll get healed, that sort of stuff. They were very strict. Very strict. I have no problem with them. They have since passed. Rest in peace. They tried to do good work, but they were strict, religiously strict. And if I was gay or queer and lived with them, I could see them not understanding my position and doing something that is untoward, but under the best of intentions. Sending me to a conversion camp or something like that. Like, I could see them potentially doing something like that out of love. And that shouldn't happen. So ensuring that these things are taken seriously is a huge step forward. It is. But let's continue on. Now, the proposal would require state agencies to ensure that LGBTQ plus youth in foster care receive safe and appropriate placements. For example, a caregiver that attempts to expose a child to so-called conversion therapy would not be considered safe, as we were just discussing. All caregivers to those youth would also receive specialized training to meet their needs. This means, things like understanding what it means to be trans, what is currently the best, care for trans kids, or the special looking for bullying stuff if the kid is potentially gay, stuff like that, right? How best to navigate the world if this child is one of those people, and that shouldn't really be an issue to anybody, to be honest. It's not that these kids need special care and attention necessarily, but they do have different kind of life outcomes, or not outcomes. They have different kind of life experiences. That's the word. Life experiences that need to be navigated, right? They're, and especially if they had been abused themselves in the past by other people, and the training that those people will receive will help make that child's life better. Full stop. So this shouldn't be a thing that anybody would be against, honestly. Now, the rule provides some descriptions of what would make that training successful, but states would also be allowed to design the training programs, the officials explained. And the proposal would provide additional support for those children, such as youth groups for those who had experienced homelessness in the past, which is another big thing. This is, Republicans talk about we have a mental health crisis on our hands, suicide, death, murder, etc. are all perpetuated because people just aren't getting the mental health that they need. This would be one way to help prevent that. Everybody should be on board with this. Additionally, a separate proposal expands access to legal representation for families, including children in foster care and parents who need help to prevent foster care involvement in the first place. In other words, it is going to encourage there to be maybe some investment into a family unit to keep them together in the first place, rather than having it split up. So that could be in the terms of material aid to a family if they're just not able to make ends meet. Job training could be something like this, mental health services, family counseling, etc. All positive things. This is something that Republicans should get on board with. 100% should get on board. Herrera said the move would, quote, transform the way these kids can look at life. This is game changing because this is going to change the complexion. That's weird. This is a weird quote from her, so I'm just going to reread this. Barrera said the moves would, quote, transform the way these kids can look at life. This is a game changing because this is going to change the complexion of how we view foster care treatment, our kids, but more importantly, how we look at the people who we rely on to care for foster kids, he said. Continuing on, he stated, quote, in practice, what that means is that a family that is at risk of entering the foster care system because their landlord is threatening eviction or because they can't access a housing voucher can now leverage federal dollars to ensure that they can remain safely at home as a family on their own, Barrera added. This is, like I said, this is one of the best things that the Biden administration has done. Full stop. When it comes to actually improving the lives of people. You know, for kids, specifically for kids. I don't care. You know, I want student loan debt forgiveness. I don't need it. I've paid off my student loans. Thanks to the military and me being able to leverage military training into a well-paying job that allowed me to pay off my loans. So I went from roughly $73,000 in debt to zero in the course of 8 years, because the military paid for roughly 75% of that. It's considered taxable income, so they take 25% of the loan payment out, so 75% goes to the servicers or to the loan providers, and then the remaining 25% has to be paid by me, and I was able to pay that off fairly quickly through tax rebates and or tax return money, and just paying it off quickly after I came into some money. You know, deploying helped, getting a new job with a little bit of bonus helped, so that was all good. So that's one of the things that Biden's done well that would help people. But this one will have generational impacts, assuming that it goes through and stays in place. I don't know if Trump or another Republican would rip these changes up. It's possible, since they help LGBTQ youth, that they would do it. They really don't like giving people money just because they have kids, and that's one of these things that could be seen as that, despite the fact that there is some Republicans, compassionate conservative Republicans, some religious Catholic Republicans and Mormon Republicans that view stuff like that as being a good thing. So I could see it potentially that staying, but also maybe not, given that everybody's just like, no, don't give people money because they have kids. We can't do that. Thanks, Joe Manchin, you fuck. So it's possible this would be gotten rid of. But if it doesn't, and it stays in place, kudos to Biden and his team for doing this. I probably have notes, and when I read it fully, once the proposals come out and the states start doing it, I think states get a little too much leeway in what they do with money like this. But right now, I can't complain about this at all. In fact, I want this to happen more. Make more of it happen. Cement it into law, Congress. Get on it. But with that concludes this segment of the News Roundup. That is huge, man. That is huge. Seriously, very big. Very big news on that. Wow. I'm shocked. I am very shocked about this. All right. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully it goes on. Because this is a big improvement. Big improvement to people's lives. Really agree. Really like it. Dig it fully. All right. Well, let's continue on with the News Roundup. We got to talk about some of the cases that are coming out of the Supreme Court. Now that they're back on the bench as of the past Monday, we'll turn to SCOTUS blog on TikTok for all of the news. First up, a big case on the Second Amendment.
The Supreme Court has set a date for one of the biggest cases of the term over the Second Amendment. The justices will hear oral argument in United States v. Rahimi on November 7th. Now, I've done a whole TikTok on this case, but it's a challenge to the federal ban on the possession of guns by individuals with a domestic violence restraining order.
The Laufenberg Amendment. All right, I'm going to let this finish, and then I'm going to talk about it a little bit. But I don't like people losing their rights permanently. There should be ways to get them restored more quickly in these instances. But the reason why this was put in place in the first place is because it was statistically significant that people that had restraining orders for domestic violence situations were... Hold on a second. Sorry about that. So, what was I? Yeah, it was the reason that this became a thing in the first place is because it was shown to be statistically significant contributor to murder by people who had domestic violence situations and had access to guns. That's why it was done in the first place. So we need to acknowledge that when we're talking about this particular law. But like I said, I don't like people losing rights permanently. I think that there should be ways to get them restored. And it's really hard to say, man. It's really hard to say.
In the same sitting on the same calendar, they're also going to hear a pair of cases about public officials blocking constituents on social media. That one's set for Halloween.
All right. And so the second law here that they're talking about is one that has specifically dealt with oh, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and let the next one play. We'll let them explain it, and then I'll jump in with some additional timing. So let's go back over to SCOTUS blog and get it up here. So this case is actually pretty interesting, and it's this weird intersection between what is a private citizen allowed to do and what a government official is allowed to do, and how that intersects specifically on social media. So let's let SCOTUS blog explain it a bit.
Does your state have social media laws that tell companies like Facebook and X how to control content? Well, the Supreme Court just agreed to weigh in on whether your state can do that or whether it violates the First Amendment in a pair of cases out of Texas and Florida. State lawmakers believed that social media companies were censoring content, particularly censoring conservative content. The Texas law bars social media platforms with at least 50 million users from blocking, removing, or demonetizing content based on the user's viewpoint. The Florida law blocks social media companies from banning political candidates and, quote, journalistic enterprises. Now, the tech companies argued that this...
All right, so this wasn't the same case. I'll talk about the other one, but this is specifically about things like the Daily Wire, Newsmax, etc., getting demonetized, Epoch Times as well, getting demonetized for basically promoting useless conspiracy theories and at times violence with their videos, or direct false information when it comes to vaccines, COVID, election integrity, etc., right? And they want these social media companies to essentially have to follow government law without being public utilities. And there's an argument to make them public utilities. Not one I agree with, but at least it's consistently to make sense. People believe that social media is so integral to people's lives now that is no different than having a phone, now a cell phone, electricity, water, natural gas, etc. Other utility companies that provide people the ability to function within a modern society. So that's the argument here. I wouldn't apply that to social media at large. One, there is now a plethora of social media that exist. We're not there while the Facebook is the biggest, and then I think it goes Facebook, Instagram, then I think it goes TikTok. No, I think it goes Facebook, Okay, I don't know what order it goes in, but it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, I believe, are the 3 biggest companies now. Ironically, the government wants to ban TikTok from existing in the United States because it's a Chinese company. But never mind that, okay? We got to protect free speech of conservatives. And then it goes Reddit, and next Reddit and Twitter. Those are like the 5 biggish ones, right? Twitter being the smallest of them. Or no, maybe Reddit's the smallest of them. Twitter's substantially smaller than Facebook. People that consider Twitter to be the town square are not realizing how little scope Twitter actually has, how few users it does. It's pretty small. But yeah, so they want them to be treated like this, when in reality, what is the public utility is the internet itself and the ability to set up a website and create a domain. That is where the utility is. I think everybody should be able to post a blog. Everybody should be able to access the internet. Everybody should be able to access the internet. And ISP should be required to be treated as a public utility because it is accessed directly to the internet. And the companies that allow people to create websites should also be accessible to the general public. And it should be fairly cheap to start up a blog. It is now. It probably should be cheaper. Oh, Jesus. I don't know when your comment came in, Liberty Twitcher. I'll get to it in a minute. I think that, but like I was saying, I think you should be able to set up a blog. You should be able to set up a website. You should be able to do all these things with relatively cheap, inexpensive material, and you shouldn't be suppressed necessarily from search engines, and people should be able to find you, right? You should be able to get. No, I'm not upset. You're just wrong about what we're about. So, anyways, but yeah, like I said, you should be able to set up a website easily. You should be able to access the internet. It should be treated as a utility. Social media is not a utility. Social media is essentially like a private board that is outside someone's store that you can post on. You're not guaranteed. You don't have a right to post in someone's board, right? You don't have a right to be in the newspaper. That's what is more akin to this. You have a right to start a newspaper. You have the right to publish a newspaper. The government can't prevent you from doing that. But you don't have a right to a newspaper. You don't have a right to a megaphone. You don't have a right to someone's storefront. That is where the disconnect is here. Okay. And then I actually forgot to pull up my chat, so I can't put this on stream. At least I don't think so. Yeah, I can't get it up on there. But Liberty Twitcher says on Twitch, free speech is super important. I never thought I'd see the day that the left is the threat to our free speech. The left isn't the threat to free speech. Not really. So here's an example, right? What's the difference between saying, hey, I want you to kill X person versus I want to kill you to kill those people? One is illegal and one is not. Why is one illegal and one is not? Because the bounds of where the law states free speech is does not take scale into account. Does not take scale into account. So if somebody creates a harassment campaign against another individual, that isn't free speech. That's harassment. That's threats. It could be potentially libel and slander, depending on the platform. Those things are not protected speech, nor should they be. Incitement to violence is not protected speech, nor should it be. But we allow right now legally for saying all X group of people are evil and should be dealt with as free speech when we wouldn't allow that for a particular individual, right? Immutable characteristic or not. And maybe there should be things to where that is allowed, but has the ability to be constrained to a degree. Maybe we shouldn't allow it. I don't know the best answer for this. It is a hard needle to thread, but we have to acknowledge the reality that the internet created, which is that these platforms allow people to gather in concert and just harass people endlessly, find out their address. It's very easy to find out where someone lives. Incredibly easy to do that. Okay? Just knowing their name. Should that information be allowed to be publicly shared and then that person gets harassed? I don't know. I legitimately don't know how best to thread that needle. But that is the primary thing that liberals and lefties are focused on when they're saying hate speech isn't free speech. Because we don't consider it to be. There used to be a thing called fighting words. Calling a black person the N-word should be considered fighting words. It's that simple. There you go. Anyways, let's let her finish this up because this is an interesting case because essentially they're saying that they don't care about freedom of association, which is another thing that a lot of people on the right don't seem to understand.
This violates their First Amendment right to control what speech appears on their platforms.
Let me rewind this because that point is important. We're going to go to here. Let her talk again.
Blocks social media companies from banning political candidates and, quote, journalistic enterprises. Now, the tech companies argue that this violates their First Amendment right to control what speech appears on their platforms.
True.
The justices invited the Biden administration to weigh in. They argued that the court should strike down both sets of requirements and that the court should answer two questions. Whether the provisions in the two laws that regulate tech companies' ability to remove, edit, or arrange the content that appears on their platform violate the First Amendment. The second question is whether provisions that require tech companies to explain their decisions to remove or edit specific content violates the First Amendment as well. And the court agreed to hear the case and limit it to those two questions. They'll likely hear oral argument in the case early next year. There's actually several social media cases percolating before the court right now. Let me know if you want me to go into the others.
Okay. Sorry. So we're going to talk about that one just a little bit more. So the question of should companies be required to be forthright with why they've banned somebody, that one I agree with. I think that the companies should be required to stipulate why someone was banned in clear terms. Basically, you posted XYZ, XYZ violated our terms of service. Congratulations, you are banned. I think that should be pretty much public knowledge, and the people should not be people should be able to look it up, all that stuff. Okay, I think that should be allowed. I think that should be required rather. I don't think that's a violation of a company's free speech because the company enters into a EULA with a consumer, and that says that X, Y, and Z is a violation of our policy. And when you enforce that EULA, they should be required to voice why those EULAs were end user license agreements were violated. I think that's perfectly fair. It follows within contract law. It's good. All right. I think that's what should happen. And there should be no questions about it. What I mean by that is if a person still be like, okay, why did this violate? The company should be required as their own terms of service state, to explain further what it is. Now you can't just be like, oh, explain. If it's not clear, a simple ask for a second one is the case. And I think that's fair. I think that's fair to it. I do think that we could also force companies to not have any permanent bans. I think that would be another thing because in general, we don't like that in law. We don't keep people locked up for life, typically speaking, unless there's an egregious offense. And even then, oftentimes we release people from prison for good behavior. And I don't see a reason why a similar thing shouldn't be applied to social media in general. I think those are all reasonable things that companies should be required to do. And the Biden administration saying those are the two questions that should be asked is very much and clear. I think those are fine. I also don't think that I don't think Republicans really should be dancing with or playing with free association at all. I think that the idea that they want to force companies to serve political ideologies is actually in contrary to what the founding fathers set up. I think that it is a direct violation of the principles of freedom of speech, freedom of association, and freedom of assembly. The spirit of those, I think forcing anybody to participate with other people is direct violation of those laws, of the First Amendment. And the reason I say that is because that was specifically created in order to allow people to congregate into groups that may not like the government, and the government therefore shouldn't be the one to tell people that they can and can't do that. And groups include companies. These companies are not monopolies, okay? The Facebook maybe shouldn't have been allowed to buy Instagram. We can argue about that. We can argue about the size of the companies, but they're not monopolies in and of themselves, especially when it comes to speech. You can still go on to WordPress, buy a cheap URL, a cheap blog, and post to your heart's content. There are competitors to YouTube now. There's several of them. You can easily stream directly to a website now for fairly cheap. I'm using Twitch and YouTube right now. I could be streaming this to my website directly. I could be streaming this to a server that I own and have that server be connected to the web, and then everybody can come and watch it there. BitChute exists. There are different competitors. So they're not monopolies. Just because their YouTube is the biggest doesn't make it a monopoly. If you're not liking one platform, you can go to another. Twitter is no longer the woke bastion that it was. It never was. And now people can leave Twitter and go to like 8 different other fucking microblogging. Threads by Instagram and Meta, or Threads by Meta. Blue Sky, which is a Twitter clone backed by Jack Dorsey. There's one that's based on Bitcoin or crypto technology. There's Mastodon, and then everybody can set up a freaking Mastodon server pretty easily too. There's the Fediverse. I think that we've already solved this problem. We don't need to solve it again. Sometimes the market does provide. Just saying. Now, with the other case that was... Sorry. Sorry about that. Now, with the other case that was interesting, the one that was on the first video, when they were talking about social media platforms in the last 10 seconds, let's go ahead and
Supreme
replay
Court
that.
has...
Sorry. I'm going to replay that one because I didn't get to that one. I wanted to talk about that, but I thought that clip was the other one.
Blocking constituents on social media. That one's set for...
All right. So this one's also interesting. So, hold on, sorry.
Same sitting on the same calendar, they're also going to hear a pair of cases about public officials blocking constituents on social media. That one's set for Halloween.
All right, so that one is interesting too. So the blocking constituents on social media is an interesting one. You are supposed to be able to seek redress from the government. It means the government can't prevent you from speaking. They can't prevent you from petitioning it, right? And social media and private accounts on social media is one way that people can talk to their sitting representative. And so if that's the case, should a representative be able to block a person on social media and prevent them from interacting? This one is actually fairly hard to thread when it comes to that needle. There is an argument to be made that people that harass their congresspeople, that directly make death threats or just say, rude, lewd shit to them, going up to AOC and saying that she's got a nice ass, for example, like what Ken 9 or whatever the fuck is Alex Stein, that's the guy, said, right? that's harassment. That should be blockable. I think that that's fair. But there is also the argument that people can have a private account and a public account. And the easiest way to kind of like go about this is to have pretty much all business that is done by a particular sitting congressperson to be handled on an official account. That includes constituent communication. So that's one way to go about it. You know, you can have your private one, which is just friends and family, and then you don't have to deal with it. And your friends and family can just be, you know, can be like 20,000 people or something, right? It doesn't have to be limited to like 500 or whatever. On Facebook, I think the max friends list is 5,000, and then followers are like 30,000 or something ridiculous. Or followers are infinite. I don't remember exactly. But maybe that's one way to go about it. I don't know. This one's actually very difficult to adjudicate, in my opinion. It's probably easiest to just do the whole we'll allow comments by anybody on certain posts and address them there. Maybe we can also thread it to where you have to be a constituent to interact with and not get blocked by a certain congressperson or state representative or whatever the case may be, city council member, yada, yada, yada. Maybe there's play in that. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. Like, that one's hard to thread. I think that one is actually difficult to do. I do think that the private account versus public account is probably the good way to go about it. It wouldn't stop harassment entirely, but it would allow people to be like, you can interact with me on here, but you can't interact with me on here. Or no, I just thought of it. So blocking right now makes it prevent you from even seeing a person's account, right? Even seeing them, interacting with them, everything, right? Maybe for public figures or for politicians specifically, a block just prevents them from direct messaging and comments directly to the congressperson. Like, you know, they still show up, but you don't get notified for it or something. Like, there might be some play in that too. I don't know. But it is a bit more difficult to thread this needle than it is the others. So I just wanted to say that. Well, we got more SCOTUS news to talk about, so let's go back over to the blog.
The new Supreme Court term begins on Monday. But today, the Supreme Court rejected Alabama's emergency request to once again let it use a congressional district map with a single majority black district. Yes, we're still talking about this, even though in June, the Supreme Court sided with a group of voters challenging Alabama's congressional district map that had only a single majority black district for the state's 7 congressional seats.
Okay, so to recap this case really quick, basically what happened is that black people make up roughly 1/3 of the amount of, a little over 1/3 of the amount of people within Alabama. And so it was designated under the Voting Rights Act that roughly 1/3 of the seats should be given and incorporate the ability for black people to represent or elect a representative that they choose directly. Alabama's like, nah, fuck that. We're going to make it only 1, and partisan gerrymandering the hell out of this area and push all of the black people, 90% of them or so, into one single district, and so that they can only have 1 representative that they picked. Under a proportional representation system, they would have 3. Under any other system, they would probably have maybe a little bit more, simply because of how gerrymandering is done. But since gerrymandering is done in the way that it is, they're going about this and saying that, you know, this is just what it is, and, you know, it's actually unconstitutional. It's a violation of the Civil Rights Act and a violation of the 14th Amendment to force the state to give quote unquote racial preferences to people in this. It's nonsense. The argument is nonsense. Roberts and the conservative Supreme Court, so Roberts and I want to say it was Gorsuch, sided with the liberals on it to say that no, they have to at least have 2 districts that are majority black, and that is under the Voting Rights Act, in the Civil Rights Act. But they're going to keep pushing this essentially until it finally the dam breaks and they can get rid of the Voting Rights Act entirely.
The court said that map likely violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and that prohibits any election practices that result in the denial or abridgment of the right to vote based on race. So why is the court still dealing with this after its decision in June? Well, Alabama enacted a new map in July of this year.
And that map is still gerrymandered the fuck that prevents black people from having 2 majority black districts.
And that map also had a single majority black district, even though the state's black residents comprise about 27% of the population. That map got challenged, and lower courts said that that map also likely violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And they appointed an expert to draw a new map. But Alabama made an emergency request to the Supreme Court earlier this month, asking them to intervene.
So they're essentially asking the court to intervene in order to create another Republican district, or another 2 Republican districts rather, since they want to reduce it to 1, in order to help cement Republican rule in the state. They don't want these districts to be representative of Democrats and more than likely black people, but they're only saying, oh no, it's not racist, it's partisanship, and that's a-okay. This entire system that we have for making districts and everything is just bullshit. We need to get rid of it. But that's what they're going with.
Now, the state argued that this new map served other priorities, like protecting incumbents and keeping local communities in southern Alabama intact.
Okay.
But challengers argued that this is really just a request to defy the Supreme Court's decision by implementing a remedy that cures nothing and prevents black voters from having the opportunity to elect the candidate of their choice in a second congressional district. They also said that if the justices put the lower court order on hold, the state was all but certain to use this dilutive map for the 2024 elections. Now, this request first went to Justice Thomas, who oversees cases coming up out of Alabama and the 11th Circuit. He referred it to the full court, and they rejected Alabama's request to put the lower court order on pause. And as you can see, there were no noted dissents. But as with every shadow docket order, we don't necessarily get a rationale for their thinking or why they voted the way they did, or a breakdown of the votes.
And we likely won't, because it's contentious within Republican circles. So that's there. And then finally, we have more here. So as news broke today in the New York Times, that new map has been accepted by the lower court and will be in effect for the 2024 election cycle. A federal court ordered Alabama to use a new congressional map that could lead the state to elect 2 black representatives for the first time in its history, with a map that creates a second district with close to a majority of black voters. The order could also lead to Democrats picking up another seat at a moment when control of the House of Representatives hinges on a thin GOP margin. The court's order is culmination of nearly 2-year fight over the Republican-dominated state's illegal dilution of black voting power. The U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Alabama signed off on a map that increases the percentage of black voters in one of the state's 6 majority white congressional districts to 48.7%. This is up from about 30%, and it preserves the state's This is up from about 30%, and it preserves the state's lone existing majority black district. The plan, one of 3 options crafted by an independent special master, quote, completely remedies the vote dilution we found and satisfies all applicable federal constitutional and statutory requirements, the panel said. Alabama is a state with a fraught history of bucking federal voting rights and civil rights laws until intervention from the courts. The state had resisted creating a second district where black voters had the ability to elect a representative of their choice. More than 1 in 4 residents of Alabama are black, but 6 of the state's 7 congressional districts have long been held by white Republicans. The state's defiance led the Supreme Court to weigh in twice this year. The court sided both times with the lower court's ruling that Alabama had violated a landmark voting rights law by undercutting the power of black voters in the state. It did not, quote, "It did not have to be this way," the lower court panel wrote in its ruling today. Continuing on, they stated, quote, "And it would not have been this way if the legislature had created a second opportunity district of majority-minority district." Wes Allen, Alabama's Secretary of State, said his office would implement the map forced upon Alabama for the 2024 election cycle. He signaled the state would continue to appeal use of the map afterwards. "It is important for all Alabamians to know that the legal portion of this process has yet to be completed," Allen said. Excuse me. It is, quote, "It is important for all Alabamians to know that the legal process portion of this process has It is important for all Alabamians to know that the legal portion of this process has yet been completed," Allen said in a statement. So that is where we are with this. Now, of course, the state is being forced to do this because the state Republican majority in the legislature is just trying to partisan their way into more victories. And it's stupid. The incentive structure in our voting process and districting process is just ass backwards. The incentive should be to make competitive districts that properly account for what the residents of the state, the district, want. The easiest way to do that would be proportional representation. It'd be the easiest way to do it. You have, there's 11 districts, say there's 10 districts, all right? So anybody that gets 10% of the vote gets the district, right? Gets the seat. That'd be the easiest way to ensure it. But that wouldn't be local control. So we have this local control thing, and the way the Constitution's written prevents proportional representation. But we could do single transferable vote, multi-member district that would approximate that process, and I think that's the way we should go. But that requires a lot of law changes. And we're not going to get there anytime soon. But we have a little more to cover. So finally, in our SCOTUS segment, in a surprising turn that might indicate that the pressure being brought to bear on the ethics of the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas actually recused himself from a case related to January 6th. This is big. Let's go. Oh, it's muted. Sorry.
Welcome to a brand new Supreme Court term, and it started off with a bang. Today, the justices took the bench for the first time since June. They always do so on the first Monday in October. That's why it's called First Monday. It started off with orders and Justice Clarence Thomas recusing himself from a case involving the 2020 election. Noteworthy because Thomas has not previously recused himself from 2020 election cases. John Eastman, a lawyer and former advisor to former President Donald Trump, had made an emergency request to the justices about blocking access to some of his old emails. Now, Eastman clerked for Thomas, and he was the primary architect of the plan to get Pence to refuse to certify the 2020 election results. And today, the justices denied his emergency request.
Okay, two things here. One, the only reason Thomas recused himself is because the look of not recusing himself would be too great. It would be the impropriety look of not recusing himself would be far too great. It would test credulity, I think is the phrase I'm looking for here. Because specifically he clerked under Thomas, which means he's more likely to be friends with the guy, respect him, etc. So having a non-biased look about Eastman in this particular case would just be too much of a bridge to cross, right? Now, you and I might know that the other reason that this should be a required recusal is because his wife was also participating within these talks with Eastman and others for the plans to overturn the 2020 election through a political coup, which it would have been had it went through. It was a political coup attempt. Okay. But that is why he should have been required to recuse himself. The fact that he's recusing himself is good news, but it's not as good as people might sink, despite my woo on that one. Second thing is that thank God the court rejected his request to prevent evidence from going out. Bro, yes, there is client privileged information communications with an attorney and their client. But when you're part of the conspiracy yourself, you don't get to invoke client privilege on that. You become part of the conspiracy, part of the crime. All right. Once that happens, you no longer have attorney-client privilege. And if the court didn't rule in that way, everybody should have been scratching head like, what? No. So that's the other thing. But let's let this continue on.
Now, today's case was about the definition of the word "and" in a provision of the First Step Act, which is a criminal justice reform law signed by former President Trump that gives judges the power to reduce certain sentences for people who are convicted of certain crimes. Now, tomorrow's argument is a big one. It's about the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
I'm sorry, these are way more. Let's rewind that. So let's go back to the Eastman thing.
Access to some of his old emails. Now, Eastman clerked for Thomas, and he was the primary architect of the plan to get Pence to refuse to certify the 2020 election results. And today, the justices denied his emergency request. Now, today's case was about the definition of the word "and" in a provision of the First Step Act, which is a criminal justice reform law signed by former President Trump that gives judges the power.
One of the interesting things about this is the First Step Act is now looked at badly by Republicans due to the small crime increase that's happened in the country since 2020.
To reduce certain sentences for people who are convicted of certain crimes. Now, tomorrow's argument is a big one. It's about the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, often called a consumer watchdog agency that was created after the 2008 financial crisis. Now, the CFPB is supposed to regulate predatory financial products.
Yes,
and it's been under fire pretty much since its inception. Now groups representing the payday lending industry.
There you go. Payday lending. So the reason payday lending are seen as predatory is because the interest rates on payday loans is way more than even credit cards are. Like, if you did an APR for a payday loan, even in states that are like, you can only charge $15 for every 100 that's borrowed, that's $15 every, week? So that is, $60 on 100? That's like 60% interest. Like, in a month. That's fucking ridiculous. That's why.
Are challenging the CFPB. Now, the Biden administration argues that a ruling in their favor could call into question a bunch of regulations that are purportedly there to protect consumers. If you want to listen live to this case, you can, starting at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, October 3rd. Welcome.
All right. Well, that concludes this segment of the News Roundup. There's nothing else to really report here. So let us now move on to the economy. And we have some big news about that. With the economy growing 2.1% in the last quarter. Huge news. So reporting from ABC News indicates that the U.S. economy grew at 2.1%. All right, got the burps. So reporting from ABC News indicates that the U.S. economy grew at 2.1% annually from April through June. This extends its sturdy performance in the face of higher interest rates, the government said on Thursday, leaving its previous estimate unchanged. The second quarter expansion of the nation's gross domestic product, its total output of goods and services, marked a modest deceleration from the economy's 2.2% annual growth from January through March. Statistical noise, 0.1%, that's statistical noise. Consumer spending, businesses' investment, and state and local government outlays drove the second quarter economic expansion. In other words, some of that money that we've been saying on this program coming into the economy is helping because business investment is being helped by some of that IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, and infrastructure spending, and that is also helping state and local governments spend more money as well. Fixing roads, bridges, etc., new parts, businesses being able to buy new equipment that is more energy efficient at a reduced cost, being able to write that off on their taxes, etc. These are all things that are part of both of those bills. So again, economic tailwinds helped by the government. For its part, consumer spending rose at an annual rate of just 0.8% from April through June, down sharply from the government's previous estimate of 1.7%, and the weakest such figure since the first quarter of 2022. Again, the government spending is helping boost the economy. Consumer spending is lower from this time last year, an annual rate of only 0.8% increase. Still an increase, but not very much, which shows that that inflation is eating into people's pocketbooks. But there's also other things that is causing that as well. Gas prices over the last quarter were higher, partly due to Russia's war in Ukraine, partly due to China reopening, partly due to Libya getting underwater, and some stuff happening in the Straits of Hormuz, like OPEC refusing to drill more oil, etc. That raised gas prices by about 60 cents or so, and that has since come down, at least in Texas. It was, I think last week it was like around 360. No, not last week. 3 weeks ago or so, it was, hitting about 360, 350 or so. Now it's back to 310, at least in my local area. So you're seeing that kind of cascade throughout the country, and that's why gas prices actually dropped recently, because those issues have been accounted for and adjusted for already, right? So that's what we have here. Now, though consumer spending is down, business investment, excluding housing, a closely watched barometer, rose at a 7.4 annual pace, the fastest rate in more than a year. In other words, business investment is still going very strong, and that is helping with job creation and economic growth. This despite the fact that a lot of businesses are leasing office buildings or had leased office buildings that aren't being utilized very much anymore. So again, this is a very strange economy. It's reconfiguring itself out of the pandemic. It's reconfiguring itself because of the reduced amount of workers in the economy, from early retirements, less people entering the United States, and it's reconfiguring itself from less people in the workforce due to early retirements, less people entering the United States, less people in the job market in general due to either family issues or death from COVID, all that stuff. But despite all that, those headwinds coming on, business investment is still going pretty strongly. Not only is business investment going strongly, government investment is going strongly as well. And that investment jumped 4.7%, the biggest such quarterly gain since 2019. Again, infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act gave governments the ability to invest more. Some of the governments are sitting on large cash reserves, which are allowing it to invest more in its people. And that is why we have good tailwinds coming out, bolstering the economy, despite the fact. That is why we have good tailwinds coming in, bolstering the economy, despite the fact that headwinds on consumer spending, primarily from inflation, is hurting it. So we're getting helped more than we're getting hurt here. And that's why we're still having a pretty good economy, despite the fact that inflation is really harming people right now. It is. Inflation's harming people right now. I don't want to accidentally underplay some of the pain that people are going through. That said, according to surveys, economic surveys across the entire country, people think that the economy is doing pretty badly, but their own personal finances are doing fairly well. So there's some give and take here. Now, growth is believed to be accelerating in the current July to September quarter, fueled in part by many still free spending consumers. Business investment is also thought to have remained solid. Economists have estimated that the economy expanded at roughly 3.2% annual rate in the third quarter, which would be the fastest quarterly growth in a year. Even more optimistic estimates have projected that growth from July through September exceeded a 4% annual rate, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Even so, the acceleration in growth isn't likely to endure. The economy is expected to weaken in the first 3 months of the year. Hiring and income growth are slowing as well. And economists think that savings that many Americans amassed during the pandemic from federal stimulus checks will have evaporated by next quarter. By next quarter? What are you talking about? That's gone. Bro. Come on. Why the economists are always so far behind, dude. That I don't know anybody that is sitting on stimulus money anymore. There wasn't that much stimulus money. A family of like 5 got, what was it? It was 12, so roughly $2,400 for the parents, and then like $600 for each child. So 600 times 3 is $1,800, $2,400. That's the 2 carry the 1, $4,200. That's gone. That's a single vacation. No. People are sitting on people that might be sitting on large cash reserves are there because people that changed jobs during the pandemic or shortly after or got new ones experienced an average of 12 to 20% increase in pay from 2019. That's why people are having a better time off, better financial situation. It's not the stimulus helped. Don't get me wrong. The stimulus did help, especially for people that were working during the pandemic. But the largest reason why economic reserves grew so much, savings grew so much, is because people weren't going out. So they sat on cash. A lot of middle class people either moved into houses and spent a lot of it. And then because they weren't going out all the time like they used to, they were sitting on more of it after spending a lot. Or they actually increased their pay, take-home pay, substantially from 2019. I am one of those people. I lucked out. Let me calculate this really quick. So I was making yeah, I got a it was 80. What was it? Yeah, I got about a 10% raise actually more than that. I'm not including a thing. So it was actually yeah, I almost got a 20% raise. Not a guaranteed 20% raise. There's some bonus money in there somewhere, but a substantial raise between 2019 and 2021 from finding a new job. I increased my earnings substantially. Okay. And a lot of people did as well. That is why we are in the situation we're in. Labor is scarce right now for a lot of different reasons. Lower immigration is one of those reasons. Not the primary reason, but it is one of those reasons. Primary reason is that a lot of people retired early. A lot of people got out of the workforce. There's a bunch of jobs. And there's people that sadly are no longer in the workforce due to COVID, directly due to COVID, either through death or long COVID, people not being able to work anymore. A lot of early retirements happened during COVID as well. My former boss retired early. I think he was 57, and he retired after I lost my job during the pandemic. Because he got tired of firing people. That's what he told me. He's like, I'm done with this. Like they've done this too many times. I'm like, fair enough, man. Fair enough. So he retired early. And there was a lot of people like that. So that's why we're like this. And speaking though of the labor shortage and the power that labor has right now, partly because of it, let's talk a little bit about some of the labor strikes that are happening now. Oh, I gotta reload this stamp. Reload this page. Hold on a second. There's a page I need to reload. All right. So, speaking of labor and labor power, let's talk about some of the strikes that are happening. So the UAW strike continues, the writer's strike is over, and SAG-AFTRA remains on strike. There's some movement, however, in the UAW strike, and this will be turning over shortly to reporting from Reuters here. I need to let the ad play because, of course, I do. All right. moving on over to Reuters.
Progress in talks to end the strikes at US automakers. That's according to people familiar with
Rewind this. There we go. All right, and then I'm supposed to... Okay.
There is progress in talks to end the strikes at US automakers. That's according to people familiar with the negotiations.
Wow, that's quick.
They say the
Been about 2
United
weeks.
Auto Workers and Ford have narrowed their differences on pay following a new offer from the firm. Talks with Chrysler parent Stellantis and other companies have also reportedly been active. One source says UAW President Sean Fain will now update union members on Friday.
Our cause is just, striking for a better future to protect our communities and to defeat corporate greed.
It's not clear whether he'll order a fresh round of walkouts or declare that sufficient progress has been made to avoid any escalation. Earlier this
So let's talk about this just a little bit before we let it continue on for roughly another 15 seconds. So the primary issue at hand with the UAW strike is the fact that the UAW and other auto workers gave a lot of concessions to the big three manufacturers, GM, Chrysler, and Ford. Chrysler is now owned by another company now, but those were the big three. During the financial Great Recession in 2008. They gave up guaranteed pay increases. They gave up health care. They gave up, overtime pay. They gave up a lot of stuff to prevent these companies from going bankrupt. And that period has passed. It's passed and then some. And yet, despite all that, the workers haven't received an increase in benefits or increased pay or any of the things that they would normally have gotten under other circumstances. And these manufacturers, these companies, are making money. They're making a lot of profit now. The UAW, under the agreement, actually owned part of these companies, but had to sell that off after I want to say it was 2011. Don't quote me on the year, but they did have to sell some of their stake off, legally speaking, because it was a deal made between the government, the UAW, and the auto manufacturers. So they didn't have the leverage that they would have had they been allowed to remain a large owner of those companies. So that's what they're fighting for. Some of the asks that they are doing are things that he used to have, such as guaranteed pensions rather than 401ks. But from a bargaining position, you ask for a lot and hope to get, somewhere in the middle where you get what you mostly want, and there is a good deal made. So that's where we're at with most of this. Gonna let this play again for about the next 15 seconds or so, and then talk about it more.
This week, Ford said it had made a comprehensive new offer that included a general pay increase of over 20%. But other sticking points are thought to remain, including overpay and union representation at future battery plants. There were also signs that the companies are digging in for a long battle, with General Motors moving to secure $6 billion in new credit.
All right. So we're going to end it there. So they're looking for guaranteed employment by the UAW at these battery manufacturing plants. Electric vehicles are going to be becoming a thing. The whole idea that electric vehicles are actually what's threatening these workers' pay is just, honestly, it's nonsense. It's dumb. It is super dumb because they're going to happen regardless. So you want them built in America. And if they're going to be built in America, you want to have unions to represent those workers. And so that's what they're fighting for. The overpay is overtime pay. Reuters being foreign is how they phrase it. So they're talking about overtime pay as well as contributions to the 401ks or pensions. Now, the 20% pay increase is huge. Now we're talking about a group of people that would have had that collectively happen to them over the course of, 4 years or so would have been roughly the 20% pay increase that they're looking for, as well as some other things there with that. And the reason why they're asking for 20% and sticking to that number is because of inflation. Cumulative inflation has been pretty high, but also to make up for the pay increases that they forego during the Great Recession and into 2017, 2018. That's where we're at here. Now, we have some additional news about this, and this is coming from US News and World Reports, was that about 75 medical workers from Kaiser Permanente's facilities went on a planned 3-day strike on Wednesday. Again, Striketober, we're becoming strike of the decade, and we're back right into Striketober. Maybe it's a little bit of the weather, spoopy season or something, but we're going to have more strikes because workers have been taken advantage of for far too long, and they're finally exercising their collective power to get what they deserve. They deserve this. They deserve these pay increases. Inflation is making these pay increases necessary. They have the power to enforce this. Not only that, the pandemic and COVID reset people's expectations of what they should get from companies that they work for. From a combination of being said, you're essential workers. We need you to work. Here's some pay increases. Here's some money that we're going to give you so you can continue to work and we can continue to operate throughout the pandemic. Made them realize, wait, this money was here all along? Why haven't I been getting that then? Makes you wonder. Makes you want to join a union to get that money that you deserve. That's what we're at. And Kaiser Permanente is no different here. Now, the strike from the medical workers at Kaiser Permanente is expected to put pressure on one of the leading not-for-profit U.S. healthcare networks to reach an agreement on a new contract. It's the largest walkout ever in U.S. health sector, surpassing a 53,000 person strike in 2018. It stems from staffing shortages plaguing the sector. It stems from staffing shortages plaguing the sector, largely a consequence of occupational burnout from COVID-19 pandemic. Everything that we're experiencing right now when it comes to labor expectations can be traced back to the pandemic. Again, people's expectations of their worth was reset during it. It made everybody question, is my place in the world respected and worth it? And if it's not, I'm going to demand more. That is largely what we're seeing here. Again, and the healthcare workers are no different. They were said, you're frontline workers, you're heroes, you deserve everything that you should get. You should get more money, you should get this, all this stuff. And people are like, you know what? You're right. And working me to the bone, forcing me to do overtime because you don't want to hire some more staff and you don't want to pay people well to get them into the job, despite the fact that you're making a lot of money, that needs to end. And that's what's going on. Now, some of the workers' key demands here include higher pay to keep up with the cost of living, a $25 per hour minimum wage for all healthcare workers, and a reformed bonus structure. $25 per hour for every healthcare worker at a minimum is the bare minimum that we should expect to give healthcare workers. From the orderly to everybody up in the chain, that is the bare minimum. $25 an hour we're going to do this math really quick. So $25 an hour for 40 hours a week for 4 weeks times 12 is $48,000 a year. Don't you think a person that is a medical worker should be roughly middle class? Don't you think they should have a living wage? I do. I think most people do. The fact that they're not paid $48,000 right now is ridiculous. I don't know why we can't just have people be paid more, man. Especially with how much CEOs get paid. My guys, like okay, I don't know. Actually, let's look this up right now. Kaiser Permanente CEO pay. What is it? Okay. 66 most highly compensated employees reported to be. Okay, so the CEO of Kaiser Permanente makes $15,562,000 of salary. And the EVP makes $5 million, and the health plan operations makes $5 million. And the CFO. So collectively, the top employees, 15,622,224, 15,562,224 plus 5,224,405 plus 5,027,913. Collectively, they make $25 million. If we reduced their pay by collectively, we'll just say 5 million and divided that by 75,000 people. Dang it. I know it's not going to be much, but it's going to be more. You know, that's $66 more. I know it wasn't going to be much. But the point is that CEO and top executive pay, if you cut the C-suite pay, even in these nonprofits, you know, even if you cut their pay by 20% collectively, right? If you cut it collectively by 20% and give that to the workers, that's still more money. You know? You know, just do it. You can get that money by cutting CEO pay. You can get some of it anyways. Continuing on though, more than 5 million US medical workers left their jobs during the pandemic, causing an acute staffing crunch across the sector and leaving employees that stayed behind feeling overworked and underpaid. The unions are asking Kaiser Permanente to make massive investment in the education and training of future healthcare workers. They also want a diminished role for vendors and third-party contractors that the healthcare network relies on. Unions across the United States have gone on strike for better working conditions and wages, with 2023 on track to become the busiest year for strikes since 2019. And with that, like I said, we're looking at the 20s, the roaring 20s, to be the roaring 20s for strikes. And hopefully it leads to more equitable outcomes for everybody. But with that concludes this segment of the News Roundup. Oh, shit. All right, I'm going to turn those into news shorts. Nikki, if you're watching. So for those that do not know, though, for those who do not know, we like to conclude our newscast with some news of the weird. And this week's news comes out of China. I'm sure some of you've seen this, but it's very interesting, to say the least. What is this? Is it tigers, lions, and bears, oh my, or a man in a bear suit? We'll let you be the judge. That is clearly a man in a bear suit. Look at those feet. Look at those feet. That's a onesie. He kind of flops down like a bear, though. That's some decent acting. Watch this again. Flop. Oh, there he goes. Sits down. Squirt away. All right. So what is this about? Oops. Well, visitors are thronging a zoo in eastern China, Zhejiang province, after a video of one of its bears went viral, with some netizens suggesting she looked so human that she might be a staff member in a bear suit of local media, as we just saw. Visiting members at Hangzhou Zoo have gone up by 30% to around 20,000 a day since a video of the Malayan sun bear named Angela became a trending topic on Chinese social media. In the widely shared video posted last Thursday that we just watched, the sun bear can be seen standing on its hind legs and stretching its neck out as it faces visitors watching from outside its enclosure before sitting back down. It was when Angela was standing up that some netizens said she looked like someone wearing a bear suit. Quote, "If this is fake, it deserves an Oscar for special effects," said one user on the Weibo microblogging platform, which is the Chinese somewhat equivalent of Twitter. But it does more. Now, the zoo has sought to refute the rumor in posts on its official WeChat account and in interviews with local media, saying that Angela is definitely not a human. What somebody would say if they were trying to disguise the fact that Angela is definitely a human. Quote, "Our zoo is government run, so that kind of situation would not happen," a member of the staff said, according to local media reports. Quote, continuing on, they stated, quote, "The temperature in the summer is nearly 104 degrees. If you put on a fursuit, you certainly couldn't last more than a few minutes without lying down." Without lying down, you say? Oh no.
General rule of thumb,
well,
markets are going
fine. Anyways, but my friends, I am sad to say that we are out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stuck with us to the end, so please smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and share us with your friends. And special shout out though to our copy producer, Nikki Adams. Without her, this copy would be a lot less robust than it is, and there'd be a little less coverage than what we do. Not a little less, a lot less. So thank you, Nikki, for that. Special thanks to our Facebook and Discord communities who share articles with us on a regular basis that we take some of this news that we share with y'all from in order to do so. So if you want to get a shout out from it, be sure to join our Discord. Join the Discord, share some news posts. We might reference you in a video when we say we covered some news that you shared. And as always, my friends, as we say at Crowdsource Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.